How many people have had a good time this weekend? Awesome, awesome. All right, so it's really my pleasure to be on this panel as the moderator. We have some excellent people here, and we're really talking about the future of hemp here in the state of Florida, and I'm sure everybody in the room here has interest and a stake in this. So I'm just going to let everybody who's on the panel kind of introduce themselves a little bit to tell you who they are so that you know. Maybe you're familiar with them, maybe you're not, but I'd like to get a little more familiar with you anyhow, so I will pass it on to Jody.
Thanks, Doc. My name is Jody James, and I've actually been working in cannabis as a policy issue, cannabis as a civil rights issue, cannabis as an inalienable rights issue for more than 27 years in the state of Florida. It has been my lifetime career, passion. I guess it's a career if you have a retirement fund, so more of a passion than a career. But I knew very early on that the arresting of my people in mass numbers was an offense. I knew early on that the prohibition of this plant to the people who desperately needed healing, and a planet that desperately needed healing, was an affront. And the universe has conspired, as some of you understand that synchronicity, to make sure that I have been surrounded for 27 years by some of the most incredible minds in the universe of cannabis and policy, to allow me to pass on some of this wisdom so that we can do great things. But spoiler alert, in the battle for Florida's green future, Mother Nature wins.
And good afternoon. I am Nikki Freed. I am currently the chair of the Florida Democratic Party. But previously, I first came involved really in the cannabis industry when I was a public defender in Alachua County, where I saw so many of my clients that were being arrested for simple possession charges or because it was just the odor of cannabis was detected, and then that was the probable cause that came afterwards. And so I always knew that my journey as an attorney always was going to center around some of that civil rights aspect of equality, access to the plant. And then the journey kind of continued in 2018 when I did something kind of crazy. I ran for statewide office and ran for Commissioner of Agriculture in the state of Florida, becoming the first female to ever been elected commissioner in not only Florida, but across the entire Southeast, and was also the only Democrat that was elected in 2018. And when I was running, I ran on 3 W's: water, weapons, and weed. It was a pretty simple when you're standing on stage and trying to go through talking points and get through the weed stuff, getting access to cannabis, getting it for patients, expansions, and also talking about the legalization of hemp in the state of Florida. It was right around the time that obviously the Farm Bill passed in 2018, and so I won. And one of the first things that I did in 2019 was make sure that we legalized hemp in the state of Florida, making sure that there was a regulatory framework, that we got our farmers to start growing it, our entrepreneurs to start participating. And during my election, I actually said that the hemp industry is going to be about a $20 to $30 billion industry in the next 5 to 10 years. The editorial boards all slammed me and said that I had lost my mind. And meanwhile, the hemp industry, 5 years into its making, is over $13 billion. So to all those editorial boards out there, you know, the environment always wins, right? And
stick around, you'll be
stick
right.
around, we'll be right.
Right.
And so obviously have been watching as the industry is growing and as the past regulator of the industry, making sure we were doing everything possible to expand the industry, to make sure that we were connecting the dots for newcomers into the industry. And now that I am chair of the party, obviously very engaged with Amendment 3, but also I'm on the International Normal Board now too, helping to continue the cannabis dream.
Love being on the panel with these two. Jody's an OG. She's one of the first people I reached out to when I became an attorney to get into the space. And Nikki coming on and blowing up the Department of Agriculture, and we miss her at the Department of Agriculture, I'll tell you that. My clients miss her at the department. So, but my name is Michael Minardi. I'm an attorney in the space. I've been an attorney for 20 years. we just basically fight for patients' rights and people's rights. We have an employment law case going on right now. Currently, it's at the appellate level to give. We won a case for a firefighter who was using medical marijuana under a breach of contract, and also the Florida Civil Rights Act. So, these are things that we push for. Gun rights issues, we unfortunately, did have an appellate decision in Florida for another person who was worked for the Department of Corrections here in the state. He was suspended and then fired for testing positive for cannabis. We also filed a lawsuit. The appellate court ended up finding because he had to, at some point in time, carry a gun during his work, that because of the federally illegal issue, that, he didn't qualify for his job duties. So now we're still fighting with the FDLE because they can make an accommodation and put him in a position where he doesn't have to use a gun, right? And if he doesn't have to possess one, desk job or something of that nature, there shouldn't be an issue. But these are the things we fight for. We're going to continue to fight for patients' rights, both to cannabis and psychedelics, until it's legal and nature is free.
All right, so I'm going to ask a few questions, but I'm going to leave some time at the end because I'm sure some of you would like to take this opportunity to ask some of our panelists questions. But I think the thing that many of you are probably wondering, as I am too, is Amendment 3, what happened in 2024? How did we not get it passed? Why did we need a supermajority? And how do we go forward with what we know from 2024? And anybody who wants to take it, I'll just pass.
Wow.
Or anybody's.
We all can.
Wow. You go. I'm good with that. I'm good with that. But they need to know that we have a gun case together.
Yes.
Because Mike alluded to it a couple
Yeah,
times.
so we'll start there. We'll start there.
And then we'll get to there.
So we do have a guns case. Because one of the things that also, when I first got into the industry, one, I have a concealed weapons permit. Probably some of you have seen my very famous picture of me holding up my concealed weapons permit and my medical marijuana card. One of the first things I made sure that was distincted inside the Department of Agriculture, that I was not going to not grant people's concealed weapons carries. But I wanted to go one step further. I want to buy another gun. I have one. But now I can't. So we got into the commissioner's office, and I turned to my general counsel probably within the first month of being elected, and I said, I want to go find a way in my official capacity to sue the federal government to allow me to go purchase a firearm. And the general counsel, who's used to like citrus and tomatoes and strawberries, looks at me and he says, yes, ma'am, my job is to get to a yes. So spent the better part of a year looking through all the nexuses between the Department of Agriculture statutes, where we can find that nexus. And what we figured was it's not very clear, the complete nexus, but if we created two classes of individuals to participate in the lawsuit, we will get through the standing question. And so we put together with Florida Can an incredible group of women and a man. Well, on the other side, on the other side, that there was two classes. One was those that are marijuana users, that are small business owners, females, that could no longer purchase a firearm. And the other class was those that were veterans who had firearms and could not get access to the cannabis industry. So that case has gone through in the lower court. The Department of Justice told us that we were witches.
Oh my goodness.
They used a 1600 case that described marijuana users as witches and prostitutes and anything you can possibly think of, ill-repute, all kinds of fun stuff. Lower court granted the Department of Justice's motion to dismiss. We have appealed it to the 11th. And had oral arguments about a year and a half ago, and we're still now waiting on the 11th. But in the interim, almost every single federal case has come out on the side for us. And so if the 11th comes down on the side of the Department of Justice, our case will be the case that goes to the Supreme Court. So we are really stoked about that.
And we are really looking out for your interests between now and when we get to a point where we have legalization.
That's right.
And that's the point.
Yeah, because the argument that we obviously made, which I don't need to make to you all, the argument is on both sides. One is if you are trying to purchase a firearm and you are a legal cannabis user, you're not going to go through legal means. So you're going to go to the black market, which doesn't have a complete background check. And so you're going through the loophole. On the other side, if you're a gun owner and you're trying to purchase, cannabis, you are also going to the illegal market. And God only knows, as we all know, what could be in those things, everything from oregano to laced with, per our Department of Justice, Attorney General says all fentanyl and all types of other things on it.
Just ask Mike.
Right. So we are obviously monitoring this because this will be, I think, a very monumental movement in our industry and movement. So we are certainly watching this. And even when I got out talking about missing me in the Department of Agriculture, had a conversation with the current person who sits in that chair and said, give me professional courtesy. If you're going to pull the department out of this case, give me a call. He didn't, they did, but we move forward. So that is
We
on.
had great plaintiffs.
Because it's fantastic. We've got
Set
great
it up
plaintiffs
perfect,
and great coordination, and we're going to win. Like, we have to win this case.
We're going to protect your Second Amendment rights
That's right.
and your right to these plants.
That's right. You should not have to choose between your two constitutional rights.
That's exactly
Right to own a firearm and your constitutional right in Florida to have access to medical cannabis. So those two. So,
And our dear man asked about Amendment 3.
and now Amendment 3. Amendment, you can start.
Excellent.
So why didn't Amendment 3 fail? And realistically, unfortunately, we're probably in the area as to what I think is a big reason why. The voting that happened down here in the Miami area was like below 50% or right at 50%. And we really, I think, needed this area to be above 60 to have it, because we were that close. And I think if it was above 60% here, we would have won in Amendment 3 last year. So all we know, and it's probably in the news if you watch politics, we had a public campaign against us. And in most of these ballot initiatives, it's a money issue, right? Who can spend more on advertising? Who puts the message out there as well? And a lot of times, it's difficult for opposition groups to raise that money. It was easy for the opposition groups in this state because our governor took that money and used your funds to fight against it. And so I think that's probably one of the biggest reasons. I heard they did a ton of targeting ads down here to the Hispanic community. And as we know as well, they spread a lot of lies during that election. The issue with the monopolies, they pushed that. And we do have a limited licensing system. But if you don't know, he then was sitting on 24 licenses. It's that legislature that was saying no on this issue that continues to fight against opening up the market.
Which legislator?
All of them.
All of them.
One side of the party.
Right.
One party.
Oh, yeah.
It's the party that I'm involved in that fights for freedom. It says that we're free.
Oh, yes.
We're the free party. But they're not free with this. So Amendment 3 was definitely blindsided by that, blindsided by the lies, and then it was, unfortunately, the division that Governor DeSantis created between the hemp and cannabis space that I think put it over the top. But all these people that would have normally went out and voted yes, that voted yes on Amendment 2, went out and said no, or just didn't go to the polls and vote. So I think that those three issues are the biggest problems, and that's why I think when we move forward and to kind of bring these together, we have to have a pathway for the hemp companies to get into the legal market when we get to adult use. The new amendment that's out there, and if you haven't signed it, please do, alludes to certain things that they argued to in the last legislative session to try to avoid those problems. We know our legislature this year denied a home grow bill, any advancement on expanding medical marijuana patients' rights, and any advancement on legalizations. So they're still against it. But all those things were in front of the legislature. So this legislature coming out and saying, no, don't vote on this because you can't home grow, because the market's a monopoly, and because of this, are the same reason why we have those restrictions. So please don't let them fool you, and understand that we can bring this industry together. It is one plant with slightly differences, and as we've seen over the past few years with this booming hemp market in the state of Florida that was originated by this young lady, is has caused a multi-million-dollar industry, thousands of jobs, and a minority, extreme minority of any detrimental effects to our society. And so it's just a pathway and a clear indication that legalization has to happen, and it has to happen now.
So one of the things that the moderator asked, and may not be familiar to everybody here, in Florida, there are 3 ways to significantly change the law. One, of course, is through the courts. One is through the legislature, and in Florida, we still have a right to change the Constitution. So not every state has that right. We're very blessed to be able to have it. But our Florida legislature in the last 20 years has continued to create barrier after barrier after barrier from what is really the last hope for citizens. And so this last initiative, the pro-cannabis side spent almost $150 million. One of the most expensive initiatives that's ever gone through. And since then, the legislature has put even further barriers into it. So, and when I started as a young activist, this was not my first rodeo with a citizens initiative. I worked on Amendment 2 with Eric Stevens, who was instrumental in that. We worked on an amendment prior to that. I'd worked on some of those. And when I first started working on them, you needed 50% of the vote to win. But the legislature put pregnant pigs into the Constitution, and the citizens of Florida said, why do we have pregnant pigs? Because the people who wanted to close the Constitution put a whole lot of money into an initiative that they knew could win, but would make for great fodder later. And they went and changed the threshold. And now you have to have 60%. Well, I'll tell you what, the initiative to make it 60% would never have won if the threshold had been 60%. So they've made it harder and harder for us. And that's why your question, Laura, your comment, who? All of them. One of the things that I've gotten out of this conference is the need for advocacy. And I hope that's what you're hearing here, is the need for advocacy. Commissioner Freed took the steps that she was given, the platform that she had, the microphone that was available to it. She made it very simple. And she's continued to promote that policy. Mike found his place, and he just continued to shine and refused to give up. And that's why these things have been brought forward in the state. But we can't do it for the rest of it, and there's so much more to do.
Thank you. I want to continue on this talk about the Citizens Initiative, because we were just talking about this outside, and I'm sure some of you are not even familiar, but just at the beginning of the month of May, DeSantis signed on a mandate that citizens initiatives would have to now post $1 million bond before starting their signature gathering, and would lessen the window where they could get the signatures, which ultimately just makes the barriers even greater. So my question for you all, is this just, a DeSantis Republican thing? Is there a way to make this bipartisan? I know that there are, in doing my little research before I got this assignment last night, that there are 5 states that have legal weed for recreational that do have Republican governors. Montana's one of them, Arizona. Some of them had switched when they had a Democratic governor, so that doesn't really count. But my thoughts are, is there a way that this can be done even with Republican leadership, or do we just have to vote Nikki Freed in 2020, whatever it is, to get you in there next? What do you guys think?
Wow. Mike's a Republican. I think we have to change the mindset of the people that we're working with. I'm going to let Nikki speak for the party. As Florida Cannabis Action Network, I tell you that we are polypartisan. We represent libertarians, no party affiliates, Republicans and Democrats. We go out of our way to pull candidates. There's a special election happening in Orange County. If you're in Orange County, we are sending to all of the hemp stores and all of the dispensaries a little poster. And if they don't have 5 leaves, they're probably not your guy. And if they have thumbs down, they're definitely not your guy. And if you can't get 5 leaves or thumbs down, I can't help. And if you can't get thumbs down or 5 leaves as who to vote for, you're no help. Because we really, Republican or Democrat, we have got to find people who are going to step outside sometimes the party structure and accept the fact that we are moving forward. I do know that the young Republicans of Hillsborough and Polk counties are very progressive on this issue. They came out in favor of Amendment 3, and then the existing infrastructure and leadership came down and pretty much said the Republican Party is not in favor. So wherever you're at, that's where you got to act.
I do think that there is a way to do this bipartisan. One is that's how it got here to begin with. That's how we got medical. You know, medical, while we got it into the Constitution, it first passed by, it was, you know, sponsor in the House was Matt Gaetz and the sponsor in the Senate with Rob Bradley. Same thing on the hemp bill. It was passed and signed by both Republicans on both, sponsored on both sides by Republicans. And even you saw President Trump came out and endorsed Amendment 3. So there is opportunity. The problem is, and I don't care if I'm saying this out loud because I say this often, Ron DeSantis is an asshole, okay? Like, he's just an asshole. Like, he came out in 2019, stood in front of cameras with John Morgan and Matt Gaetz and asked the Republican legislature, or they were going to drop the lawsuit on smokable flower and ask the legislature to enact it. So an amount of people, Republicans, that came up to me for my 4 years as I was commissioner, we need to get recreational. Yes, don't look at me. I'm in favor of this. Go talk to the leaders of your party. So I do think that there is opportunity because you have to be able to also know how to speak about this issue. And I think that's where the advocacy comes into place. One, what do Republicans really like? They like business. They like money. And so that also followed the dollars. That it wasn't so much that DeSantis, you know, he used, as Michael was saying, the hemp industry against the marijuana industry because he knew how he can find money. It had nothing to do with his own personal, like, he cares about cannabis. How can you have vetoed the hemp bill last year and be supportive of the hemp industry and then yet be worried about the smell of the cannabis side? So this is all fodder. This is all smoke and mirrors and politics. When he is out of office and we can get sensible people back into office, whether the Republicans, obviously I'm chair of the party, I'm going to always want to be Democrats, but as long as we get balance back to the state and get sensible individuals that are elected into office, let's be real, no matter what part of state you go to, people are smoking weed. That is just, I don't care where you go in the state of Florida. I was in Cedar Key last week. No one even probably knows where Cedar Key is, okay? and rural farms that are like, hey, when can we start growing our cannabis plants? Like, again, you know, so there is an opportunity, but we got to do our part. Every 2 years, there's new House members that are elected and senators. Go up to Tallahassee, lobby on this issue, talk about it, the business aspect, the money that comes in. We're getting 1/3 of our federal dollars that are potentially being stripped away from the federal government. And now we're talking about getting rid of property taxes. So which means the state of Florida is going to have to raise the sales tax to something like 21%. Well, there's other ways to bring in revenue to our state. That is legalization of cannabis and making sure that we have access to the merging of the hemp industry, the cannabis industry. I had this conversation ad nauseum with Kim Rivers in 2024 and said there is a way to break up vertical integration. We've got 20,000 stores across our state. People are growing hemp all across the country. There's processing plants. There's distribution mechanisms. This will make you all allow you to reduce costs, expand the access to more entrepreneurs and businesses. There's a way to do this. And how we have to do this is by talking in one voice, which I know in this industry is near to impossible, as much as possible, educate our elected officials about the important. You have sheriffs that come out for legalizations. You've got state attorneys that have come out for legalization. This is one of those last bipartisan issues as long as we get the assholes out of government.
Shameless plug for Florida Can. Shameless plug for Florida Can. Advocacy is one of our tenants.
All right, thank you. I'm going to go to the Republican on the panel here next.
All right.
But Mike, I actually want to. Nikki was just talking about the economic piece here, and I just wanted to ask you, in your position as an attorney, what have you seen in terms of legal strategies that seem to be effective in moving the needle towards reform in the state?
Well, legal strategies, I think a lot of times is having the client with the courage to stand up to the laws and the bad laws. You know, when you're losing a job and you know, you're like, oh, I could either go back to work and stop using medical cannabis, or I could fight for my rights. You know, things of that nature. In the medical necessity cases we had, it's just courage about people standing up and fighting. You know, we are challenging right now the 2.5 ounce limit and the in-package requirement as well. We have tape of a wonderful senator admitting on stage that, you know, the 2.5 ounce limit came from basically a barber. They were hanging around the barber shop, and he's like, oh, you know, hey, barber, I think his name is Junior or something. How's 2 ounces? He's like, yeah, 2 ounces is okay. He's like, how's 2.5 ounces? Oh, that would be great. I could have a great time with 2.5 ounces. Call was made to Ray Rodriguez, who was the House at the time. How's 2.5 ounces? Okay, agreed. So that's how you as a patient, that's how much respect they have for you as to what you need as a patient to use. And, you know, 2.5 ounces every 35 days is kind of ridiculous when the federal patient gets 3/4 of a pound every 28 days. The issue is education for other members of my party. I think a lot of them are very ignorant about this issue. They don't understand, especially the hemp issue. You know, she says $1 billion. I think hemp is going to be $1 trillion industry. And I'm not talking about the stuff we see downstairs, but the real hemp that we can change the world with, right? Change our oceans. You know, there's a lawsuit against Ziploc for microplastics in your body, right? And I think we can get to that. So that's what it's about, education, getting the farmers on board, exactly what she said, you know, building an industry for them, especially we have our trees, you know, hurt by the hurricanes. We got our citrus industry, which was hurt again by the cold weather this year. So these are all things that I think we need to bring together, and it's really education. You know, they're still going out there blaming cannabis for psychosis and things of that nature. And patients and people don't use things, I think most of the time, that are harmful to them, that they don't enjoy, that they don't get some sort of benefit out of. And there are people that get addicted 100%. But 20% of people that use all drugs get addicted. That's it. So this is something we really have to educate on. You have to talk to your legislators. You know, don't be afraid to come out of the closet if you're a Republican and talk about this issue. I know campaigning, a lot of people would bring me aside and tell me their edible story and stuff. Right. You know, it's like, so, you know, just be free about it. And we have to bring back, if you're going to fight for freedom, it has to mean freedom, not just a freedom as to what I believe it is. And I do believe these plants and this medicine is inalienable rights and something that should be free to everybody to use, you know, just like we can get a Neuralink in or biohacking at this point, right?
I just want to go, you mentioned about the industrial side. You know, the $10 to $20 billion industry was just my calculation for the human consumption side, but the industrial side, I've 20 to 30,000 known usages for the hemp plant. It is the #1 plant in the world for carbon sequestration and to carbon capture. Tax refunds on things. I mean, already the USDA has put out grants for the industrialization of the hemp plant. This is how we're going to save our planet. This is how we're going to get all of the toxins out of our, off the ground. This is, I mean, it is just such a miracle plant on every single aspect. I know, unfortunately, that's what I do every day. With the person that I live with, goes through a day and says, I can replace that with hemp. I can replace that with hemp. I can replace that with hemp. So it is coming. And it is, I have been saying, is going to be an industrial revolution. And that I've always said that the edible side of it and the consumption side of it is just the seed capital for the industrial side.
From your ears to your mouth to God's ears.
Well, it's funny, we're sort of playing Jeopardy up here, because question number 4 is, what is the role hemp industry has in the wider legalization movement? So Nikki just answered that question for us.
Are we moving on?
Yeah. I did have a thought that came to mind, just in the sense that we were talking about partisanship, and then I realized I'm non-affiliated. How many people here are non-affiliated? Like independents? Okay. I wonder, has anybody, you may not know this, so I'm sorry to throw this at you, but has anybody looked at the independent vote towards Amendment 3? What was it like? Do you know?
Yeah,
Do you have numbers?
I don't have exact numbers, but
That's Hector. I don't know where Hector is.
yeah, I don't have the exact numbers of where the NPAs broke, but you could tell by just, if you're talking about, it got under 50% here in Miami-Dade, and seeing just the turnout, I would say probably roughly 65% of independents voted no.
So we're having, as Florida Cannabis Action Network, and I knew there was something missing. Hector was going to be here. Hector Roos is doing some political consulting with us, and that's one of the things that we're looking at. We have a website, fldecides.com, and you can fill in your zip code, and you can find out what we have learned over the last 12 years about the person who is running for office in your district. So we may know nothing, which means they've made no comments. You may find that they are, seriously, and one of the things that we think is important is building the kind of voting bloc that is going to push this issue. The NRA is an extremely powerful voting bloc in most states. We are certainly a gun rights state here in Florida. There's a woman by the name of Marion Hammer who works at the legislature. Marion Hammer is the gun lady, and when she walks into an office, lawmakers are afraid. They put up billboards and say the other guy is the great NRA guy, right? He's a big old billboard. When we start taking on those kind of tactics, when we organize ourselves that way, we will be a powerhouse. It doesn't matter because we are already crossing all political spectrums. But until we put people forward that think like we do, we don't see the significant changes in all the areas that we need.
Thank you, Jody. I'm sure there's probably some questions from people. I have one more that I'm going to ask myself and then leave some space for anybody, and hopefully I see some hands. That's great. But this is probably something, if you're sitting in the audience, you probably are wondering this, and that is, what is the most effective action that Florida citizens can take towards the support for cannabis freedom? I know you sort of just answered
I'm going to shameless plug Florida Canada Minute, so I'll let Mike start.
I'll plug you for you.
Okay, thanks.
Definitely, one of the best organizations in the state, I can say, and I'm no longer affiliated with them, besides obviously love them, is Florida Cannabis Action Network. They're up at the legislature every year. They're the only group that does it year after year up there trying to educate these people. So they're the number one people to get involved with. Number two, educate yourself on the issues. You know, when you follow them, you know who their local legislators are and things of that nature, so you'd easily be able to contact them. And they may or may not listen to you. Don't be offended, but just make sure that they know there's constituents in their district that support, you know, reform in these spaces. And then also, you know, your friends and family, get them involved and make sure they do it. And I just want to come back and make one more comment on the ballot initiative process, because it's really gross. As someone, I've ran multiple ballot initiatives for legalization, for home cultivation, and the thing that they're doing is they're limiting the amount of time to turn in from paid petitioners the ballot initiative to like 10 days from signing to turning them in. As a sponsor and as an organization that does that, and then they turn around and they complain about the fraud, right? And they have to realize, as a sponsor of an organization, I am now paying. I don't want fraud. None of these sponsors want fraudulent petitions turned in. Not even close, because it costs them double. Not only are they paying the petitioner, but then they have to pay the state to get them validated. They should really, if they want to get rid of fraud, it's an easy fix. Put it on the sponsors. Let the sponsors give them the time to themselves validate the petitions, and then decide which ones to turn in. And then if we get fraudulent petitions for people, and what we used to do, and we called up the Department of Elections about it, because I'm like, why am I spending $1.25 plus this when I know this stack of petitions is all in the same handwriting? And they said, oh no, by statute, you have to send them in. So, just don't let them scam you on those issues. It's just a lie, and, the better process is to put it on the sponsors, allow them to not pay those people unless they get valid petitions that they can verify. And then get involved, sign the petition. Right now, as Jody said, and we're talking about, this initiative process keeps on getting more and more difficult. I said in the last election, this may be the last chance we ever have to do so. If they get it on the ballot, I guarantee you, and it's going to get harder. So, it's $120 million at least at this point for these people to do so. They're going to stop at some point. So we need to get on board regardless of the biases, and we'll figure those out. Sign the petition, send it in, and vote yes on whatever we pass.
One other thing, too, is that if you are a small business owner or a patient, go visit your local electeds, whether it's a member of the House or the Senate or even your members of Congress. Because they too have decisions always to make up in Washington, D.C. Whether it is a safe banking, whether it's any of the other bills that have gone through in Congress. They're a little bit messed up right now, but when they get back into doing normal routine passage of bills, but go visit, because they need to. What Michael was saying is, not only is it, if you care about this issue, but show them how many jobs you're employing in your business. What is the benefit to them? All of your business records, have them show. That's why a lot of the original MMTCs took legislators out to the grow houses to show them what the grows look like. This is new. We all live in this space. But if you're not in this space all the time, this is foreign to you. If you're not somebody who has, a medical marijuana card, or it's just not something that was part of your upbringing or conversations that you had in the household, and you've never experienced either cannabis or even now the hemp products, it's foreign to you. You don't understand. And so going in there, having conversations, showing them the business aspects, inviting them to the store to see how clean our stores are, to see the customer service, the knowledge of all of our tenders and the people that are working there, and showing them this is a regulated business that is part of the ecosystem of these communities, and show it to them, whether it's your local city and county commissioners, your mayors, your police. Make sure you're having great relationships with your local law enforcement, making sure that you're inviting local law enforcement into your businesses. This is how you build a community that is supportive of what we are working on at the local level, and that's how you eventually make change. When you have a legislature who says, I actually met with this incredible veteran who has come home from 2 tours in Iraq, came home and was lost, and has now opened up this really incredible hemp store and is helping a lot of veterans in my district. How can I vote to put him out of business? Those are the types of conversations that we need to be having with the decision makers who are making the ultimate decisions.
When you come to Tallahassee with Florida Cannabis Action Network, the thing that we suggest is make friends. And so a lot of what you've heard this weekend is about the way we can have a responsible community, and expanding your sphere of influence, wherever that might be. If you're a gamer, talk about it more gaming. If you're a gardener, talk about it at the garden club. If you are a gardener and you haven't joined the garden club, don't be afraid to join. Because one of the things that Mike said makes change is someone being fearless. Well, you don't have to necessarily sue the federal government. Sometimes being fearless is when the guy says something stupid at the water cooler, correcting him. And every one of us can make sure that we let no ignorance go unanswered.
Thank you for those answers. I just want to add, I'm not involved in cannabis that much, but I am involved in chemistry, and I just received an email a few days ago that there is a town hall for the American Chemical Society to start considering a cannabis chemistry division within the American Chemical Society, which is huge, given that there's so much that needs to be understood about the science behind the plant. So we're seeing motion in the science field as well. We have 3 distinguished people and 1 okay person as moderating that will be happy to answer questions at the time. If anybody has a question, please go ahead. If you'll just say it out loud, and I'll repeat it for the folks on the webcast.
My first question is to Michael Minardi, related to, as a taxpayer in Hillsborough County and someone that works in Venice, knowing my tax dollars are going towards Casey DeSantis, not
think we need a Dodge in every state, right? I mean, I don't know what's going to happen with it, but hopefully something does. You know, our taxpayers' dollars go to so many useful things. And just like even fighting against smokable flower, our taxpayer dollars were going to that lawsuit. Fighting against the opening up of licenses, our taxpayer dollars were going to that lawsuit that lasted for 4 years. So our taxpayer dollars, despite 71% and 57% supporting legalization, continue to go against this industry and against these products. And it's really, I mean, it's something we have to continue to stand up for. And exactly like she said, let's cut property taxes, make it easy, allow people to live in Florida, not rape them year after year by your taxes going up, and tax a reasonable product that everybody wants, everybody uses. And you're worried about all the spring breakers in South Florida? Let them smoke a little weed, they'll chill out.
But I'm going to go more into Hope, Florida. For those who don't know what just happened.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just a minute.
Casey DeSantis, James Uthmeyer, our Attorney General, who has been appointed and non-elected, stole $10 million from Medicaid. That is point blank what has happened. That flatline, like there was a Medicaid, there was a company that was overbilling the patients. And there was a lawsuit. And they came in and did a pre-negotiation. And instead of the settlement being $67 million, which is what it was supposed to be, $57 million went back to the state to have these overpayments. $10 million from whoever, which as this investigation is going to go through, who was in that room, took $10 million of our dollars, Medicaid, federal dollars, to help needy families, took those dollars, then transferred it to Hope, Florida, which is a product of Casey DeSantis, and took the $10 million, then shoveled it $5 million and $5 million to two other PCs that were run by, at the time, the chief of staff for Ron DeSantis, who's now the attorney general. It went $5 million. Then that money went to attack Amendment 3 and Amendment 4, and eventually the money went into the Republican Party of Florida. If that isn't criminal all the way down the line, RICO all the way up the line, and we are not going to let this stand. We have asked for the Republican Party to return the dollars to the state of Florida. We have made sure, and obviously we did not uncover this, it was another Republican, Representative Andrade from the Panhandle, and he is not letting it go. And as of this week, the state attorney from Leon County has opened up an investigation, criminal investigation, and everybody is hoping the Department of Justice, or at least the Northern District, does so too. Somebody's got to go down for this.
There you go. There you go. Yes, go ahead.
My second question is related to rescheduling and what your thoughts are on rescheduling cannabis.
At the federal level? Yeah, okay.
I'm going to let the attorneys finish on this, but I will tell you that as part of what Cannabis Action Network did when all of this came together was we did an extensive working group, bringing in people from the United Nations to look at international policy, people looking at what was happening in federal law. We met together over about a 3-month period in an afternoon. Some people knew nothing when we started, and they did little research jobs. Some people edited it at the end. And we have a position paper on our website, flcan.org, talking about why really what we need to do is to deschedule cannabis. So the flower should never have been on the Controlled Substance Act. There are probably preparations of cannabis that could easily be controlled because of what they are, and once they are controlled, then they become part of the insurance scheme, right? And that's a great use for some of these products that pharmaceutical companies are going to want, but the plant itself doesn't belong in the Controlled Substance Act.
And I'll be really quick, and I'm going to go into my normal hat, that we are in favor, obviously, of the descheduling. We think that if we reschedule, is going to create, we're going to be stuck there for a very long time. and the unintended or intended consequences of a rescheduling puts into all types of loose questions about what types of products can come out, how does that get done, is there going to be a difference if you are in a legal state or a medical state, how does the 280E going to be applied at that? There's just too many other questions.
Right.
Just deschedule it and call it a day. I don't know why we're going through this whole shit show.
Yep. If you want to get a product approved, you do that.
And the shit show it is if you've watched the descheduling. There's been lawsuits against companies because they're colluding with the DEA, and one pro-cannabis company was allowed to testify, and like 12 anti-cannabis companies. So it's really been a disgusting process on the federal level. I continue to bang my head against the wall and file in state court motions to dismiss based on the constitutionality of cannabis as a Schedule I substance. There's an awesome dissenting opinion from the early 80s, late 70s, where a dissenting judge in the 70s said cannabis has medical value, it shouldn't be a Schedule I substance. And we're still here today when the number one deadly drug that we see, we got to stop the infiltration of fentanyl, is a Schedule II substance. Come on, get real. It's got to end. So I continue to fight for that, and I will tell you it will be appealed. And we have now a 252-page report from Health and Human Services recommending it be rescheduled. And, we have the end of Chevron and deference to these agencies. And in Florida, they're not supposed to give deference to these agencies. So I'm just hoping a judge will listen and do the right thing, because there's no way that cannabis should be a Schedule I substance.
And since the event is Cannadelic, I can also say that in terms of psychedelics, the last time I came to Cannadelic, it was right when Australia had descheduled psilocybin and MDMA, and since then in the U.S., now that we have RFK Jr. and the head of HHS, and he's pretty pro-psychedelic, they may have an impact on rescheduling psychedelics to maybe Schedule III, like ketamine is. I know that the FDA, the head of FDA, Marty McCary, was on TV just last night talking about trying to push psychedelic therapy, so hopefully we'll see some movement in that. We still have time for maybe one or two questions. Go ahead.
What's your opinion on the threat of psilocybin spores becoming illegal? How do you control that? How do they?
They are illegal.
Yeah, so she asked, what's the threat of?
But how do you control something that's just in the air? I don't understand.
How do you control that something that's in the air?
How do you make something illegal that's just everywhere?
So what you're going to see is selective enforcement. So it's 100% just another charge to be able to put out there, another opportunity to give them. Mushrooms were already quasi. This one is definitely going to go through the courts. Again, there's 3 ways to change the law. This one's absolutely going to go through the courts because it says any spore capable of producing mycelium. Hello. The one thing that, if I don't get to say anything else, I want to say that whatever you do when you leave here, make sure you're having fun. I hope that's what you've seen from us. We've all been in this for more than a minute, and the reason you keep coming back is because you see people's lives change, and you have a good time seeing people impacted by the work that you're doing. So have fun. Yes. She's having fun.
I am having fun.
I know you are.
You're going to answer?
We have another question over here, unless you want to keep talking about the
No, that's fine.
spores.
Hi,
Hello.
thank you.
Hi, Masha.
So I was wondering what you thought about the hemp in food rules with the food coloring and all of that. If you could give it tell the audience just like a quick description, how that passed and WTF.
Also, for the recording's sake, they need to know the question.
Yeah, so she's asking about the recent passed rule, I guess, in May regarding, or March, was it March?
Sure.
Regarding new restrictions on food coloring and different products that you can put in hemp products. I know a bunch of my clients are, looking at repackaging and deciding, like, can we still sell these products for how long? So it's going to be a big issue, I think, for a lot of people, and especially those companies that are out of state, especially with the food dyes. I know there's an issue of even whether or not you can have a dye from the natural, if you put in a fruit to the plant, like an elderberry or gummy. Right, exactly.
So, like no turmeric, saffron, beet, all of it. So as a testing lab, we can't actually test for it. Like we have to send it out to a nutritional lab. And nutritional labs don't even test for it. Like who tests for saffron?
Yeah.
Why?
So I think they're just doing everything they can in every way that they can to restrict this market, and that's what I've seen since she's left office. It's changed significantly. The website changed overnight. For the first month, you couldn't even find hemp products or how to find a hemp license. And they had the Drug Enforcement Agency logo and the new drug eradication logo up there. So, hopefully our next commissioner is someone that supports this plant and is going to push for it and help protect the entities that are involved in it, as opposed to restricting them. Again, this is a multi-million-dollar business that's employing tens of thousands of people that is good for the state of Florida.
And my heart breaks.
Right.
Like, and I know how many businesses came here to Florida. We have 170,000 people that work in the hemp industry right now, and those numbers are a year and a half old. To know that you have government at the highest levels trying to make it more difficult for businesses to succeed is counter to what government is supposed to do. And unfortunately, yes, successor wants to kill the industry. Like that is his goal. His goal is to kill the industry, one, because it was created under a previous administration, and two, a Democrat, but two, also because he's in bed with MMTCs. And so is trying to make it much more difficult for the hemp industry to be successful. And I wish that there was another way around it besides just continuously to show up and to advocate, and then to file lawsuits as far as when they're going too far and they're overstepping their roles and their responsibilities. But this industry isn't going anywhere. The people that keep coming back to conferences across the state, across the country, more businesses that are opening up, new creative ways. I mean, the fact that we've got hemp THC products in our convenience stores, are in Total Wine, like that shows where the industry is going from the first time that Michael and I thought about this. That things have changed so much, and it's going to continue because that is the cannabis industry. We are iconoclasts. We are people that break the system and break the structure. That is who we are. No matter what type of barriers are put in front of us, we find ways around them. That is who we are. And we will continue to do that, and you have to continue to show up, continue to be entrepreneurs, continue to think outside the box. They are not going to say no because the consumers want this. So keep showing up, keep fighting.
There you go. And for my clients, I would tell them file variances and look up the Sherwin-Williams case.
So it's 5 o'clock, and I know that we want to move to the next, but before we move, I would just like to have the audience really thank Jody and Nikki and Michael for the many years and the dedication that you've done for the space. It means a lot, and your work doesn't go unnoticed, so thank you. And thank all of you for your attention, and next we have the Brez folks coming up to talk about the cannabis beverages.
That's right.